A guy in Colorado was asked to bake a special wedding cake for a gay wedding. He didn't want to do it. And then he got in trouble because you can't discriminate in Colorado based on, gender, sexuality, and things of that nature. This led to a big debate where the left typically says he should serve these customers and the right is saying he shouldn't have to make a custom cake for these people. And this is where the issue comes in. It's very hard to communicate, especially on Twitter. Well, before I get into my points, this is the story. The baker in same-sex wedding cake case back in court on bias allegations because now it's less than a month after the Supreme Court issued its June ruling, which handed Baker Jack Phillips a partial win. Colorado found that he had again violated the state's public accommodation laws by refusing to make a cake with a blue exterior and a pink interior for Autumn Scardina. The state argued that Phillips denied Scardina service because she is transgender. Here's what happened. A transgender woman wanted a coming out cake, like a gender confirmation cake, and he refused to do it. Here's the debate and the nuance. First, I'll say this. I am typically in favor of, if you have a business license and you are using public infrastructure and resources, you, in my opinion, should serve the public, and you can't discriminate based on certain characteristics. There's nuance here, right? So listen, if someone comes into your business and starts, throwing stuff and yelling, yeah, by all means, get rid of them. If they come in and they're disrespectful, by all means, get rid of them. If someone comes in, you stop them and say, what country are you from? You can't come in here. What religion are you? You can't come. Oh, your skin color, you can't come in here. Oh, you're trans, you can't come in here. Oh, you're gay. That I disagree with completely. But there is nuance here. In the instance of the wedding cake, it was creating a custom job. Now, it's tough. Let me just make one thing clear. This guy had a partial win. They ruled that Colorado couldn't have done what they did. It's a little bit complicated, but for the most part, he kind of won. Right? He didn't have. He's got his victory. People on the right have said this guy was being asked to produce speech. Essentially, they were asking him to do a custom job. Essentially, the left doesn't seem to realize that this wasn't an instance of him denying service. He said, by all means, all of the cakes in my store are readily and available for you to buy. It was that they said, no, we want you to go out of your way to do something above and beyond to provide a service where you would speak a certain thing. This is where things get interesting. When it comes to Twitter and these other platforms, they're protected under Section 230. Essentially, the idea is they can't be forced to speak, which means if you are, a trans person, Twitter has a right to ban you for being trans seemingly in violation of civil rights law, because you are telling Twitter what they can or cannot publish, and that is a violation of their free speech. The government can't do that. We now have an interesting conundrum where if you go to a baker and say, I want you to bake this cake with this message, you're essentially asking that person to produce something that would express an idea, and you can't force them to express that idea. Now, this is a complicated case. I got another story, a more important one. This is from the Daily Wire. 2 female Christian artists could be jailed, they put in all caps, for not creating art for same-sex weddings. Now, I don't know about the jailing. That sounds a bit hyperbolic, but we'll read through it. But there is a big difference between these two cases, and this is where nuance bleeds over into a definitive case. If the baker advertises custom cake services, then you have a potential issue. I recognize the speech issue where the government can't compel you to speak something. But the way I see it with Twitter openly says, everybody come here. You can do this thing on our platform. Oh, hold on. Except you can't come here. People talk about, but it's a private platform. They can do whatever they want. I'm like, well, hold on. It's a private platform, sure, but they're inviting the public to engage in a certain behavior or activity. If they punish people selectively, they're biased. And to a certain degree, I think there should be restrictions on that, because how can you advertise an open and inclusive place where people can engage in this business, but then exclude people you don't like? Right? But it is complicated. It really is. It's not black or white. In the instance of the wedding cake, here's what I think is an important point. If he says this business provides custom cakes upon request, it's something they regularly do, the government is not forcing him to work necessarily. They are simply saying, if this is your job, don't deny it to people based on these certain grounds. I don't think suing him, fining him, I simply say, okay, then take that service off. If you're not going to provide a service of custom messaging to the wider public because you have beliefs that are at odds with our civil rights law, then perhaps you shouldn't offer that service, plain and simple. It's not that he should be forced to work. It should simply be, if you're not willing to provide to the public, then just stop doing this generally and continue to sell regular generic cakes, non-custom cakes. You can make cakes that have specific messages as long as they weren't intended for specific people. Again, it is complicated, but that's typically my opinion. But I do agree that you shouldn't force someone to produce a message. And so this is where it becomes particularly complicated. Was he discriminating against them for being gay? I think the answer is no, he wasn't. He was discriminating he was discriminating on the grounds that he didn't want to say certain things. So I think that's clearly visible in the issue of, he said, my understanding is, you can have whatever cake you want, I just won't make a cake that says this thing. If it is the case, because I'm not an expert on the issue, that he simply said, I won't make a cake for you, period, because it's for a gay wedding, well, then you've got another issue where he's going beyond the confines of what his business is supposed to offer. So let me explain it a certain way, why I have a more liberal position on this. His business is serviced by health inspectors, by public infrastructure such as the roads in front of his building, the deliveries, the plumbing infrastructure, the gas infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure. Many of the things again, the safety he's afforded by the fire department and the police department protecting his business. All of these things are public resources where people pitch in. So this is why I think if you have a business license and you're serving the public, you should serve the public. There is an argument over monopolies that people have brought up. This is really interesting. They said, only if you're a monopoly. If people have a choice to go to a different bakery, then they should. And I think that's a good argument. I think it's probably the best argument. This man is a small bakery. It's not that they have no other options, so maybe they should just go somewhere else. It's different when you have Twitter and Facebook, which are monopolies in their own space, or Patreon, which is a monopoly. In that case, there actually are more legal restrictions. For the most part, I just think it's like, look, oh man, you know what? I'll say this. It's tough. It really is. But let's go to this story about art. This is where I think things are dramatically different. So in this instance, it was a same-sex couple wanted art created. Well, art is a literal expression of the artist. They sign their name to it, and it exists forever. This is dramatically different from baking a cake that's going to be eaten and will never exist again, maybe in some photos. There's an overlap, but I have to say, like, there's nuance in all things. There's a big difference between a cake, which is perishable, but sure, there'll be photos of it, and a piece of artwork, which is meant to exist in longevity with your name on it. I guess, theoretically, she could just, not put her name on it. But what they say is, two female Christian artists in Arizona who refused to make custom art for same-sex weddings could actually be jailed for sticking to their religious beliefs. Joanna Duca and Brianna Kofsky, who own Brush and Nib Studio, make custom artwork using painting, calligraphy, and hand lettering. They filed suit against the city of Phoenix as a Phoenix city ordinance threatens to shut them up with 6 months up to 6 months and/or a fine of $2,500 each day they refuse to make the artwork. First, the women filed in state court to overturn the ordinance, but lost in a court of appeals, prompting them to appeal to the state Supreme Court, which said on November 20th it would hear their case. I want to point something out, too, that I should have pointed out a long time ago. This second instance, where they want the transgender cake to this baker, to me, does sound like harassment. It does. This is a group of people that are targeting a business based on his religious beliefs to cause him strife. They look, if you know this guy has issues with certain ideologies, you can avoid him. It's not a monopoly. But now in this case, this person knows full well who this guy is. He's rather famous in this instance, and it seems like they're just targeting him because they want to create more problems. And that in my opinion is wrong. Like if I would actually put it this way too. I feel like if you have a business and you put up a sign saying, here are the services we offer and here are the services we don't offer, then I think it would be more fair if someone came in and said, I want something, and he said, that's like, look, you read the sign, we don't do that. There really is a big challenge, and let me tell you why I kind of lean towards the more liberal side of these things. I understand the monopoly argument, and that's probably the best argument, and I can respect it, and it actually does sway my opinion a little bit. But I have concern over, let's say you set up a business. You are occupying public space. There could theoretically be other businesses there. And if you restrict what your business can do to certain people, then you have a business that only services a portion of the population. Maybe it's a large portion of the population, but it still excludes certain people. That means maybe there could have been a bakery there that would be willing to serve all members of the public. Long story short, I just feel like if you are paying taxes, you're a taxpayer in this country, you are entitled to services of those who reap the benefits of your taxes. And while the businesses pay taxes too, 100%, The only reason we're able to function we have certain functions, the post office, fire department, police department, is because everyone pitches in. So that means you are benefiting off of taxpayer money, and now you're denying services to those who actually pitch in to provide you certain securities. I think in terms of the art, this is clear cut. You can't make someone create art. And this is where it overlaps with the bakery. And another good argument is that they wanted him to express himself in a certain way. But there is a big difference, in my opinion. And this is what the courts are for, I believe. Courts are supposed to interpret the nuance between these things and take the individual consideration of what is or isn't right. But it is tough. You want to make sure you're not producing laws that are benefiting one group over another, but you also want to make sure that you recognize the differences between these circumstances. So they say, as the briefs filed this week affirm, the government shouldn't threaten artists with jail time and fines to force them to create art that violates their beliefs. Joanna and Brown work with all people. They just don't promote all messages. Creative professionals should be free to create art consistent with their convictions without the threat of government punishment. Instead, the government must protect the freedoms of artists to choose which messages to express through their own creations. Let me make one more point to those who may be upset or disagree with my opinion. What these rules mean is that in Washington, D.C., for instance, where political ideology is protected class, if the left wants to argue that people who make art have to make this art, otherwise it's a crime, then I strongly encourage anyone to go into Washington, D.C. and find an artist and ask them to make whatever political ideology content they want, because that is protected as well. Imagine where that will lead us, right? There's a difference between food and art, but I would also point out in terms of the cake, this is where another important point is made that favors the right, in my opinion. If the baker is forced under civil rights law, human rights law, to produce a certain message, that means that there are certain ideologies that would have to be pushed because the customer wants it. The best example I would say is Washington, D.C., though. There's a lot of people with extremist views who are moving to D.C. because you can literally walk into a restaurant with the most psychotic political message you can think of, so long as it doesn't break the law, and they can't refuse you service based on your politics. So, yeah, there's a lot of people of a certain group, if you know what I mean, who are moving there. Let me just put it this way. It's a complicated issue. I err on the side of general services should be provided to all people regardless of certain characteristics. What makes the bakery case so troubling and so hard is that it was a combination of he was going to provide them a service, but he didn't want to say a certain thing. And this is the big challenge. I'm not an expert on, and I'm rather center-left on the issue, which means, don't get me wrong, I certainly think there's nuance here, and it's not a perfect issue. A lot of people said the government can't force you to produce something. No, they can't. You're right. And that's why I think it's wrong what they're doing in the case of these artists. They shouldn't be fined. They shouldn't be the penalty shouldn't be jail time. It shouldn't be fining. It should be something more business-related. Not, I don't know how to do it. Honestly, I really don't. Look, this is one of those really tough situations, and it's why we talk about it. But I don't know. You know what? My opinions are not set in stone. You know, I'm always open to better understanding and learning. So if you have a comment, you want to sway my opinion, comment below. I do read them. And maybe you can come up with an argument to everything I said and prove me wrong. I certainly don't think I'm a genius or an expert on the issue. These are just my thoughts based on what I've read. And trust me when I say I'm trying to make sure I protect the individual liberties and freedoms of all people while making sure we can all live together and work towards a future where we treat each other as Americans, not as this group or that group. You know what I mean? I want a country where we can all be like, you're American, I'm American, this is awesome, we're America, and we fight for those interests. Whatever you want to do in your private time, whatever you believe is you. That's what I'm hoping to accomplish. Maybe this isn't the right way to do it. I just don't know. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm right or wrong, if you agree with me or disagree, and then that's how we do a better job of moving forward. I certainly would never pull a Jimmy Kimmel and insult people for having a disagreement with me, and maybe there are certain things I don't understand. And that's why we have these conversations. So thanks for hanging out. I'm going to get out of here for now, and I will see you all next time.